Good afternoon, everyone. Today is May the 16th, and welcome everyone to today's talk event, which is about healthy relationships. Especially in this pandemic, it's so important that we are able to maintain the healthy relationships, not only with our families, with our work, but also with the youth, our millennials, our senior citizens, everyone. But how can we do that? And today we are really delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Abha Rai. Welcome, Dr. Rai. Welcome to Sanjeevni. So without much ado, we're going to begin the event. The agenda is Dr. Rai will be presenting slides, and we also have our other guest speakers, Ananya, our youth representative. We have Vikram, and we have Devi representing the millennials. They are both medical students, and we also thank our audiences who have joined via Zoom, and they're also watching via Facebook. So Dr. Abharai, do you want to introduce yourself and then we'll go on with the slides?
Sure. So my name is Abha Rai, and I'm an assistant professor at Loyola University Chicago, and I've been volunteering and working with Sanjeevni for a few months now. My area of research interest or expertise mostly pertains to gender-based violence in the South Asian community and then broadly among the immigrant community. So that's what I've been sort of focusing on for the past couple of years, and I'm continued to stay focused, and I'm interested in this topic, and I'm really excited, first of all, to be here to engage in this sort of dialogue with you all today. Even though we have slides, I'd just like to keep this pretty informal because the goal is to have a conversation and not for me to present anything or um, this is not a formal presentation. I want to say that I really want to hear from you. I want us to engage and deconstruct some of these ideas around healthy relationships so that it's sort of mutually beneficial.
Sure.
um
Well,
yeah, so Pramila will help me with sharing slides, I think.
yes, for sure. And we also want to let our audiences know that you do not have to, turn on your camera. You can always ask questions via chat or through phone. Everything is, the answers are important. It's not important, to disclose who you are or any other information. So let me just share the screen.
Thank you. So yes, like I said, I'm from Loyola University. My email is on here, so if anyone's interested in reaching out to me privately for any questions, etc., if you can't do that via chat, just email me or send me a message, and I'll send you my phone number, and we can talk more as well. Next. So the goal really is of this conversation really is let's try and define what a healthy intimate relationship is. We'll talk a little bit more about what is healthy versus unhealthy in relationships. We look at some research that I've worked on and that I've come across. And then we also talk about some ways in which you can support a friend or someone who's facing any type of problem in their relationship, or if you feel like there's red flags and you feel like they are in an unhealthy relationship, what is it that you can do? Next. So before we go on to sort of jump into this topic a bit more, for the people present here on the Zoom call, um, what do you think is a healthy, intimate relationship? How would you, like, if you were to think of a phrase or a word to define it, how would you do that? Anyone, just unmute yourselves and you can start talking.
For me, I think a relationship where there's a lot of communication is something that's very healthy.
Good.
Caring.
Caring. Good. Thank you.
I would like to add respect for each other and respecting each other's boundaries.
Good. Thank you. So we heard communication, care, respect for each other, respect for boundaries, anything else? Well, these are all important topics, and as we kind of go along, we'll see that these are important constituents of a healthy relationships, obviously, as you can imagine. And we'll talk about them a little bit more as we sort of go along. Next. So, like we said, when thinking about a relationship, thinking about signs of a healthy relationships, obviously, is trust, honesty, independence, respect, equality. Even if there's conflict, healthy conflict is always okay. You don't have to always agree, but if you're doing it respectfully, um, it's still all right, and it's part of a healthy relationship. Whereas if you think about an unhealthy relationship, being possessive, manipulative, sabotaging, or trying to control your friend circle, trying to take over your phone and try to read your messages, or texting on your behalf, emailing on your behalf, talking on your behalf, betraying you, a lot of intense moments of anger, joy, happiness, everything with a lot of intensity is, always there has to be some sort of repercussion for that. So these are all signs of, sort of an unhealthy relationship. And I got all of this from this website called One Love Foundation, which is a great website if you're ever interested in sort of exploring the constituents of a healthy, unhealthy relationship. They have tons and tons of videos and resources on dating violence, understanding relationship boundaries. If you want to learn something for yourself, you could also get resources from there and try and demonstrate something to the community. So it's a great resource. Next. So there's different forms of abuse if you think about dating violence or relationship violence. There's sexual abuse, obviously, if there's any type of sexual activity happening without consent. No definitely means no. Anything happening without it is definitely abuse. And if it's happening sexually, even like kissing, things like that, it qualifies as sexual abuse. Physical abuse, obviously, like hitting, pushing, pulling hair, tearing clothes, all of these things sort of qualifies that. Emotional verbal abuse is like screaming in public, or even sort of like threatening you that if you do this, I will do this to your family, I will do this to your friend. All of that sort of qualifies as emotional or verbal abuse, which can be damaging to the person experiencing it. Financial abuse, obviously, if your partner takes away your credit card and they're trying to control your finances, or they're trying to use up all your money without your consent, obviously that does qualify as financial abuse. Stalking, if someone's sort of repeatedly following you, they're outside your house, they're running into you constantly, you're going to a mall, they're always there, you're going to your friend's house, they're right there outside waiting for you. So all of this is also sort of stalking. Another form of abuse, which is also related to it, sort of lives at the intersection of digital abuse and stalking, is this like online stalking or online abuse, or even using your technology and texting on your behalf, or taking your phone and reading who are you messaging, when were you last seen on WhatsApp, when were you last seen on Facebook Messenger, who did you text last, have you deleted messages, is it going into your archives, doing all of these things basically without your consent, is a form of digital abuse. Next. Yeah. So what do you think, in just one, Pramila? Um, in thinking about these sort of conversations, what do you think would you say yes or no to the following? Is it okay for your partner to check your phone? Would you say yes or no? You could even like thumbs up or thumbs down, or say something in the chat.
I think it's depends on the situation and the relationship. It would be okay for the partner to check the phone if it's open and they don't really mind. But if it's something that the partner would like to keep private to themselves, that's a boundary that you should be respecting of theirs.
Okay, good. Important. I think respecting boundaries definitely important. Ananya?
Yeah, I agree. I think if it's a consensual check, I think it's fine. But I think once again, if your partner does say, "I'd rather you not check my phone," I think that's important to respect because otherwise you're kind of breaching their trust and not really listening to their voice and their opinion too. So.
Thank you. Next, Pramila. It's okay for your partner to ask you to sext, pictures to them using
No,
Snapchat. No? Someone said
no.
no? Okay. Yes. Any other thoughts?
Again, I think this actually would depend on the situation. Obviously, it's not entirely secure what you send over the internet, but I do know that that doesn't stop necessarily everyone from partaking in these behaviors, sending these pictures, and especially in like long distance relationships and stuff like this kind of behavior is more prevalent and can actually facilitate intimacy between partners. Um, I think it would be okay if this is something that is comfortable for both people involved and they are being safe about it. And there's a sense of security that the other partner is not going to release these photos to the public or show it to the other people.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I also think as so someone who is younger, I think that anyone who's under the age of 18 should not be doing it regardless because that is actually illegal.
I agree.
But
You
I
have, you have
think
to be an adult. Yes.
exactly right, and I think if that is something that someone wants to do, I think it's okay as long as there's no manipulation, um, and no one trying to like manipulate your mind and think that that's the only thing you can do to have a good relationship. So I think it depends on the person and it depends on the situation, but if you're under 18, it's a definite no for me. So yeah.
Yeah, great points. I mean, I definitely think that it does depend on the relationship. And as long as, whatever you do in the relationship, as long as you're providing consent, and of course, you understand your age limits and what platform you're using and who has access to it. If you understand all of this, if someone's not forcing you to do it, it would be, your decision to make. But I would, if anyone would, partake in either like checking your phone, asking you to send pictures. Just it's important to sort of think about what is the impact of that on your relationship. Like, why do you need to do it? How do you feel about it? Ask yourself that. If even if you have like a 1% doubt and it's not your personality, it's fine. Your partner should be understanding of it, and if that doesn't work for you, you don't have to stay in a relationship where you have to make these level of compromises that basically do not resonate with you. So I would just sort of say that and just be sort of mindful about that. There's next couple of scenarios which, for the sake of time, I'd just like you to read them and think about it, and we can sort of circle back in the end. So Pramila, I think there's, I want to say five more. So if you can just hit like five times next, next, next. So it's important, as we sort of go along and circle back to our discussion in the end. Think about whether you feel it's okay for your partner to tell you who you can and cannot be friends with. How does that make you feel? Again, pressure for any type of sexual relationship. Whether it is having sex or doing anything else that you perceive as unwarranted or you're not consenting to. It's okay then when thinking about other people, what you can do, which is what we'll sort of focus on in the end. Do you think it's okay for your friend to be slapped by her partner? Do you think it's okay for your friend's partner to cut her off from you? That happens a lot in relationships. And do you think it's okay for your partner to make a video of both of you while kissing? This also happens a lot in younger relationships, newer relationships. So I want you all to take a few moments and sort of think about this, and we can circle back to this in the end. Okay, next. So let's look at some research to understand, how true and prevalent dating violence is. It's definitely not something in your mind. It definitely does happen in reality. So dating abuse is also known as dating violence, intimate partner violence, or relationship abuse. And it is a form of, several abusive behaviors sort of tied together, which is usually done to exert power and control in a relationship. It's mostly done by one partner against the other. Sometimes there's families involved, especially when thinking about the South Asian culture. Most of my research and work has been in domestic violence, which is where we see that families are involved as well. And the similar sort of pattern and behavior also continues in younger dating relationships when someone could be like, hey, if you don't do this, I'll call your mom, or I'll call your family and tell them this, or if you don't do this, I'll let your brother know, or I'll tell your friend this, or if this gets out, think about what's going to happen to you, what's going to happen to your family honor. So it's a series of abusive behaviors. Usually it's not an isolated event, but it's several factors sort of combined together. Next. So, about 43 to 57% of college students experience some type of dating violence. These statistics, I definitely think, are underreported. While this is what we found, I don't think every single college student experiencing dating abuse is going to report it, especially when thinking about international students or students from minority communities. They're afraid to go and talk to anybody. Sometimes their families are not accepting of, dating. They're not sure who they can talk to and use as a resource. So individuals who experience dating violence in college, they're at a higher risk of experiencing IPV later on in their lives as well. So the risk increases. Dating violence, obviously, as you can imagine, has negative health impacts on health and well-being of students, and it can lead to, psychological distress, low self-esteem, anxiety, etc. later on in life. There's several reasons for which you could either be a perpetrator or someone who's experiencing violence. Some of these factors could be adverse childhood experiences. You've experienced maybe your parents experiencing domestic violence, or there's community factors. Maybe you were bullied when you were younger, so maybe it's that sort of built up anger that can lead for you to perpetrate abuse later on. Some other factors could be, drug use, alcohol consumption, or just even, thinking about other environmental factors. It could also be gender role stereotypes. We've heard this like a million times. Boys don't cry. Oh, she's a girl. Oh, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Or you're a guy. This is your image. So maybe like sometimes even to satisfy and continue to support those gender role stereotypes, people may continue to either experience or perpetrate violence. So, obviously, even though this research exists, there's very little that's officially known about the extent to which college students are seeking help when experiencing dating violence. Next. I think it's the previous slide. So recently, I worked on a study across different universities. I think it was 7 universities, and our sample was about 2,200 students. 45% of these people, of these students, experience some type of dating violence or victimization. However, only 28.1% sought help. So that itself is like almost like close to only half. Obviously, people utilized informal help more, which is generally known in the domestic violence, DV, dating violence literature anyway, which is support through friends, immediate family, co-workers, other people in the community, like an auntie or an uncle that you're close to. Whereas there were fewer people, only about 200 people that actually received formal sort of help, which is, ideally through, social work agencies, programs, counseling, medical services, police, and, even going to like shelters. Next. So, obviously, as you can imagine, there could be several reasons for not seeking help, which is that this is a private matter. I don't want to attract too much attention to it than needed. It's inconvenient to seek help. I don't want to get my partner into trouble because what if they break up with me? What am I going to do then? And then also, like, I'm afraid, like, what else would my partner do? Will they keep stalking me? How will it ever stop? So, these are some reasons for not seeking help. And then, when thinking about like international audiences or international, communities or students, international students mostly, it could be because of cultural factors. When talking with international students, a lot of them, they're afraid that this is going to go back to my parents or this is going to somehow go back to my families. What if the police or the social worker, what if they just call my family and let them know? What am I going to do then? My parents are, they're going to throw me out of the house, are going to disown me. This is sort of a common fear. So these are some reasons for which, people or younger students may continue to sort of stay in abusive relationships. Next. So obviously, we all know that some ways in which we could sort of tackle this is by speaking about it, such as, what we're doing today. It's important for us to understand that, people can be in abusive relationship. The goal is not really to shame people who are in abusive relationships. Because ideally, it's really their choice. If you are telling somebody, you can support them, you can provide them resources, but if we try to tell someone, like if I'm telling Pramila, I don't think you're doing the right thing, you need to do XYZ. In that situation, what I'm doing is I'm really taking on power from someone who was a perpetrator onto myself, and then I'm trying to control the situation again. So this is usually not helpful. You can definitely say, hey, I found a cool list of resources, you can access this, or how does that make you feel? So have some open ended questions where you're allowing the opportunity for some reflection and in depth thinking versus saying this is right or this is wrong, because you really don't know. Right and wrong is very subjective, it depends on you and how you feel in the relationship, right? And then there's also a need for culturally specific services, especially for people of color, students of color, communities of color. It's very unlikely if me as if I'm Indian and I'm experiencing abuse, I'm not sure which agency would I go to. Would I be more likely to go to an agency that sort of serves the South Asian community, or maybe a mainstream agency that has specific programs? What if I don't know English, or what if I don't want to communicate in English? What if I want to talk about my family's culture? If I want to do all of these things, it's important that services are culturally responsive. Not a lot of mainstream programs may understand the extent to which our family values sort of play into this as well, because family values may not play into maybe a community that's not South Asian, or maybe that's a Western community. All in all, obviously, you don't have to stay in an abusive relationship. No one really has to. It is really your choice. And you should exercise that choice. You should, sort of feel empowered enough on your own to make the decision that's right for you. Next. That's it. I would like to now hear from other people, our audience, our experts here. Pramila, really about what do you think about, or what have you heard about dating in your own community or culture, and then what are some ways in which you can sort of support others that are experiencing any type of abuse in a relationship. Okay, should we stop sharing so that we can actually look at each other, Pramila? Okay, thank you.
At this time, Dr. Abha, we will also open it to our, the rest of the audiences. Feel free to ask any questions, especially Ananya, Vikram, Devi. What have you seen in your campuses, with your friends, and where else can Dr. Abha provide insight? So it's all open. Feel free to ask any questions, which and we can have a discussion as well.
One trend I've actually seen, especially during my time in college or later in high school, with friends who were in these toxic relationships, is that a lot of times they'll break up and they'll get back together, and they'll break up and they'll get back together. So, if you know anyone who is in the situation, what is some advice you can give them to kind of commit to making healthier decisions for themselves? If anyone has any ideas.
Dr.
I
Abha,
think.
thanks for Sridevi. And I think there was also a note from Ritu. She says open communication is also key.
Mhm.
Uh, and everyone, if there's any response to Sridevi's question, feel free to respond by audio or by chat.
I was just going to say that I think the reason behind constantly getting back together with someone is usually because someone in the relationship is insecure and feels like going back to that person would be something that is what they want to happen. I think sometimes some of us tend to get really attached to certain friends, or at least in my experience with friends, you're really attached to this friendship and you really want to make it work, but you guys are toxic for each other, so you guys keep having a friendship breakup and you come back. And I think it must be similar with a friendship or a relationship as well, because you're really wanting it to work and you know that you've had such great experiences in the past that you're willing to overlook the toxicity, which I think is probably a factor involved.
I think so. I definitely think that's a great point because you're also like sometimes so used to each other. So it's really hard to let go of that. It's comfortable, you're in a routine, even though it's toxic, there's still like some moments of, hope and happiness that are there, and you sort of want to keep coming back to that. So, what do you do really? I mean, I want us to all sort of also think about what could we do? How could we? I know there's again no right or wrong answer. It's not like, this is a math equation, and if we say this is the solution. But what can we do consciously on our own to identify unhealthy signs in a relationship or any red flags, and how do we sort of confront it?
Yeah, something I saw a lot in like college, for sure, was like other like being vigilant of your friend groups like was some of the most protective things that like ever happened. So you see a relationship where these individuals used to have 7 friends each or something, right? And then for one reason or another they start distancing themselves, right? You don't know who's doing it, but for some reason they're not as socially connected as they were before, right? That's something that you're noticing as as a bystander, right? If you're close to either one of those individuals, checking in with them is one of the most valuable things you can do. And again, as I was been saying, don't shame them at all for that. Just see where they are with it and provide them the resources.
Absolutely, I agree. I also think that as someone in a relationship, something you can do is really just know your self-worth. I think before getting into a relationship, it's important to be your own person, be comfortable with who you are, because once you're comfortable with who you are, you're not going to rely your happiness on someone else, and that will avoid that toxicity of like going back to the same person. So I think establishing yourself as someone who you love and that you know is worthy of love will help you distinguish what's healthy and what's not.
Uh, Dr. Abha, one question has come through again a private chat. What has changed during the pandemic? How has relationships from healthy has gone into being unhealthy? What can be done to mitigate that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Just thinking about relationships, and this sort of stands true for any relationship, but of course it has deeper meaning when thinking about intimate relationships. I think, during the pandemic, generally looking at domestic violence, dating violence research, the research says there's limited studies. So I want to kind of preface this whole thing with that. But research says that domestic violence has gone up because, you're, especially for people who are sort of living together, which could be, couples that are dating or that are married, or whatever format they're living together, because you're spending a lot of time with someone who's sort of perpetrating that abuse, and second is because of the lockdown, there's also very few opportunities to actually go out and seek help. Earlier on, you could actually go out and go for relationship counseling, or on your own seek some counseling and support, or even go to your friend's house, talk to somebody about it. But if you're living in the same house 24/7, there's very little opportunity for you to even call your friend. I mean, even if you call your friend, what can you say, right? um, you're not going to sit in front of someone who's perpetrating violence and be like, hey, this is what's happening with me. So there's very little opportunity. Also, a lot of shelters and counseling agencies during the COVID pandemic have been overwhelmed, because their employees are also not able to come in regularly. They have their own family experiences that they're having. A lot of hotlines are actually overwhelmed with the number of calls people are getting. Some agencies, and Pramila can also speak a bit more about some of the trends that they've seen with Sanjeevni, but a lot of agencies are seeing calls either early morning or late night when, probably the partner is sleeping. So they're either like hiding in the cupboard or, somewhere in the corner of their home and quickly trying to make a call, and sort of get some support. So, pretty much, this is what's happening, to my knowledge, in the pandemic. There have been some great ways in which support has been provided and can be provided. So, there have been initiatives in other countries, probably in Europe, where people have been able to use a safe word. So, when you're going to a pharmacy, if you say something like lipstick, that's just sign that you're experiencing abuse, and it sort of sends a trigger to the pharmacist, and then they can quickly provide you support. I also read recently through a drive-through, which was piloted probably somewhere in Texas, one of these drive-through sort of food places. Again, you could use a code word and say something to the person at the drive-through counter and be like, again, makeup or something like that. And then they sort of immediately get triggered and provide you support. A lot of agencies have also been doing check ins relating to self care with people, in general, not specifically around dating abuse, because the moment you sort of call any check in, related to domestic violence or dating violence, half the audience drops out because they don't want their name to be associated with that. If it's a couple, they do not want to get on the same call. It's awkward and weird. So even during the self-care, there's time for individuals to reflect, because sometimes you don't even understand you're experiencing abuse, with especially with instances like gaslighting, where your partner is pretty much controlling even your mind and saying that, oh, you're making this up, I don't even think this happened, it's two people in the house. So if someone sort of does this repeatedly, you also sort of start self-doubting yourself. And what am I saying? Is that even accurate? Like, did I even see this? Maybe not. Maybe I am indeed making it up. So, a lot of agencies have started now using this self care time as an opportunity for people to go through these reflection questions. And again, a way to tackle this, I'm not sure if this has been done, but I think the code words could even work like this, where agencies can be given a code word, and then they can check in with the person who's used the code word later through texting or something like that, so they're not put in this awkward situation where during in the call with their partner or with a lot of people, they have to sort of talk about their experience right then. So pretty much this has been the situation and some solutions, but I'm happy to hear from our other experts and even our audience, and Pramila, what you've seen thus far.
I think in the past, since the pandemic started, a number of calls definitely increased significantly, and a lot of calls come between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. One of the reasons is, if if there's a couple, right? So yes, one of the partner is sleeping, or maybe if the kids are sleeping, so let me step out and make that call. And sometimes even if people are alone, there's also digital abuse, because people are far apart, but there's verbal abuse. So all of these questions are significant. And unfortunately, when if law enforcement is called to say, it was just a verbal abuse, nothing happened to hurt you, but verbal abuse is equally hurtful, right? Even with with anyone, like even like teenagers or millennials or couples or any age range, wherever couples or any family members are involved. So Ananya, I would like to ask you, in the past 8 months, we've received about 10 calls from teenagers going through again being in a relationship question. So teenagers in school, one is they said, oh, they're missing their friends, or they have a significant other, a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and they're unable to meet them. What do I do? And the big question they asked, my parents do not understand my need to have a person who is more of a companion. You're my parent, it's okay, but I also need someone, as my companion, as my significant other. So Ananya, as a teenager, what do you feel? Or Vikram Devi, what are your thoughts? Or Dr. Abha?
Absolutely. I think a lot of us have grown up with friends because we all have different, I guess you could say, conversations with different people. I think certain relationships are built with certain friends as well that are hard to replicate at home all the time. And I also think that a lot of our parents have grown up with their friends, and they've grown up with such a, I think the South Asian culture is very collaborative and very like loving with other people. So I think a lot of our parents have grown up with that, but sometimes it's hard for our parents to kind of remember how integral it is to our culture. And I also think that a lot of teenagers, especially girls and boys my age, we tend to feel secure around our friends and feel like that's a stress buster for us because that's when we get to escape our academic stress. And I don't think that staying at home is always the best option for that. So I guess you could say that a lot of teenagers associate going out uh, or going out with their friends as a stress buster and a way to feel comfortable and feel like they're around other people so they can get change. And I don't think that means they don't love their family. I just think that means that they just need a change in environment, just like every other human does. So I think that's something that's definitely a part of the whole missing your friends and missing relationships with people, even if you love your parents and have a good relationship with them.
Thank you, Ananya. Vikram Devi, you're in the college campus. Are you physically taking classes, or it's all online for you?
So currently we're actually doing clinical rotations. And so we're moving between cities and at staying with different hospitals. Is there a question you'd like to ask?
Yeah, one question again. We've also come up with a lot of men, especially male, within the age group of 30 to 35 reaching. So maybe we will be interested to hear, Vikram, your perspective. Again, just a representation of the male. One of the questions is, they are feeling lonely, but they feel really they feel it inappropriate to express their loneliness in a relationship to their partner. Makes them feel less of a male. And this is again specifically between the ages of 30 to 35. Some of them, in a relationship, some of them maybe having a little kid, so very young.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the ways that I like to think about, a lot of those like kind of masculinity things where it comes down to like, oh, I don't want to show my emotion because I'm kind of afraid of doing that. I haven't really been comfortable doing that before. I'm not going to start now. Right. The way I like to think about that is imagine the sacrifice that you're taking by not being vulnerable. So imagine that you're really lonely right now, or you're not actually expressing yourself properly to your partner, right? And you feel like you can't because you're not supposed to be expressing your emotions, right? Um, Imagine the sacrifice. It's not. It's way worse to not. It's way better to take that risk, and it's not really a risk because the people around you are going to be more supporting than you think they are. So yeah, I would say take that risk if you're a man.
Thank you, Vikram. Dr. Abha, what is in your opinion in any healthy relationship? Is the onus normally we would always say, everyone is an equal partner, both for the male, I mean, male, female, or whatever is there, the gender specific within that relationship. Is there someone to give more than the other? What is your opinion? Who
Yeah.
contributes more to it to make the relationship work?
I think it should be, well, this is what I think. Even in my personal relationship with my husband, I try and make sure we're doing, almost the same things. And it doesn't have to be like I do 50% of the housework, you do 10% of this. It doesn't have to be that specific. But if you're feeling like you're both emotionally and physically contributing the same to the relationship, I think achieving that right balance is always important. There could be some days and weeks where one person has to do more than the other, but that happens with friendships also, and that happens even with your parents. I mean, sometimes you give more, sometimes you get more. But I do think that, what we sort of started with in the beginning, that as long as there's equal respect, there's, trust, and you're feeling like you're able to communicate honestly and openly. I do think that that's really important in a relationship. And then going back to this idea of masculinity and femininity, I think masculinity is okay and great, but there's a point when masculinity can become toxic masculinity. Now that's a problem. We want to dismantle that. We want to dismantle patriarchy. And I say this just because, sometimes toxic masculinity can be bad for both people in the relationship. Because, like similar to what Vikram was saying, if you're not expressing yourself, more than doing harm to the other person, you're also harming yourself, like your own mental health. So, why? Why do you have to be strong all the time? If you're experiencing something, you can seek out and get resources. And more than, this being the onus on the couple, I also think all of us as, within the South Asian diaspora, especially, and within the larger, Western community as well, I do think the stereotypes that we perpetuate for men, being strong, like who's wearing the pants in the relationship, these kind of questions come up. Why? Why can't the woman be the household provider? Like, it really depends on the couple. I mean, whoever, if it works for them, sure. Why do you want to make a judgment on that? So I feel like it is all on us. I think the onus is on all of us to make sure that we're not perpetuating these really harmful gender role stereotypes, because not only are they're harming you and your family internally for sure, but then they're harming like thousands and millions of other people, because you decided to talk about this. Or growing up in India, I heard a lot. There was a group of aunties in the community who always had an opinion on everything. The way you dress up, the friends you make, whatever you do. So as long as the auntie supported you, you were this cool person in the community. If the auntie shunned you, it's over. So, why does that need to happen? I feel like, if especially for the younger generation, I would say that, if you feel like your parents are sometimes perpetuating this, go and rationalize this with them. I started doing that. Of course, I'm not in the younger generation, I think, but I've tried to rationalize this with the people around me. Why is this a different school of thought? Not necessarily something is wrong or right, not necessarily, what we're saying is right per se, but it's a different way of thinking and maybe more beneficial even to the changing times. These days, women and men are sort of pretty much doing the same thing. Um, Even with men, if someone wants to be a chef, why do you want to go and cook? Go out, be an engineer. So why? Like, let's question that and be like, why can't they be a chef? If that's your skill and quality, or be a ballet dancer. So I would say that, yes, if you feel like that's your skill set, you want to be a ballet dancer, please be. And even, like, I want to sum this up by saying, even with relationships, within the South Asian context, we talk a lot about heterosexual relationships, which also is sort of a problem. If you want to, date someone belonging to the same gender, you're fluid, you're still discovering your identity. I also think it's okay to, be open about those conversations and not always, thinking about, oh, because you're a boy, you have to date a girl. If you're a girl, you have to date a boy. Maybe, that was done traditionally, but it doesn't have to be. It really is your choice and decision. And it's pretty much something, an identity, like you're born with some facial features. I also feel like your, sexual preferences and identity, you're pretty much born with, you grew up with. So it's not like a switch on and off that you, today I decide to do this and tomorrow I decide to do that. So I feel like it's really important for us as a community to come together and really dismantle these archaic, harmful, really toxic cultural values that we still hold on to.
I have something to touch on really quick, just following up on the idea of the toxic masculinity and kind of challenge what we deem as strong and weak. For example, I believe that confronting your own emotions or your own shortcomings and being honest with yourself is a sign of strength. And for example, and projecting any insecurity you're feeling on others would be a sign of weakness. I know that in our community, an issue that a lot of people face with the men in their lives is that the men have been taught to channel all of their emotions into just anger, and that anger can often be displaced on the people they loved in their lives. And so it's important to just challenge the idea that, anger is strength, and there's more healthy ways to approach that. I also think that that anger can be channeled into a lot of toxic behaviors with their loved ones as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that, like, I think at this juncture, there's nothing within Indian culture and all of the generalizations and kind of like absolutisms that we've kind of received from all of our relatives over time that isn't worth examining. All of it is worth examining. That's it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I think also, just to add on to that, once again, toxic masculinity is very much a large part of our society. And I think it's unfortunate because I think a lot of women tend to use that to justify male behavior, like common phrases like boys will be boys. No, that's not okay. You can't just say that, oh, because he's a boy, he's going to act like this and he's allowed to, and all of these things. And I think you should not justify a way a girl acts because she's a girl either. I think it's important to see what your shortcomings are, once again, adding on to what was already said, and looking at those don't make you weak, but seeing what you do with the identification of your shortcomings is what identifies if you're a strong person or a weak person. And I think that you shouldn't have to justify inappropriate behaviors based off someone's gender. That's not a justification. Everyone has the ability to grow and to change, and their gender has absolutely nothing to do with how they can change or who they are. And I think that the reason why that's perpetuated is because some of us tend to have that like ingrained into our system. And so it's important to try to change that and try to treat, male and female equally. And from there, I think that's the best way to go.
Thank you so much, Vikram, Devi, Ananya. Definitely, I think these are great insights. And, if representatives from, your groups, if they can, spread this information further, I think at least what has been in the past, we cannot change. But the future, we all have the ability to change that with your help, of course. We have just 9 more minutes. Is there any other question from anyone in the Zoom call? Probably none. Very useful insight, Dr. Rai. Do you have any, ending note as we conclude the session?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that I really did enjoy this conversation, and this is like pretty much what I was hoping for and expecting. So, thank you all for sharing all of these really wonderful ideas and thoughts that you had, including your own experiences. Similar to what Pramila said, I do think that, and I strongly believe that the power really does lie with you and the message that you take forward. in, your own circles, your families, your own communities, because like, all of you said, we don't have to, we don't have to sort of keep perpetuating this. It should and definitely can stop with, you all. It can stop with that generation. So it doesn't have to be 10 more, cycles of generation sort of talking about the same thing. So I really do feel that you all are capable and empowered to sort of spread this message forward. And I'm really excited to see, how you all continue doing that in your own networks. And thank you, Pramila, for having me here also.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. Thank you, our special guest, Vikram, Devi, Ananya, and everyone who has joined on the Zoom call and also watching on Facebook Live. This session will also be available on our website. Once again, have a great day. Thank you, Dr. Rai, for all of the information shared today. We can conclude it. Thank you, Ananya, Vikram, Devi, and everyone joining the call. Bye.
Thank you, Pramila. Bye.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.